Welcome to Novara Live. In fact, the final Novara Live of 2025. We will be having some content coming out between now and the new year, but I feel a bit bad, our last show being on the 19th of December, but it's because of where Christmas landed. I'm joined for the first time, me and you in the studio. I know you've been in the studio many times before. Helena, aka NoJusticeMTG.
Looking forward to the show. First time in the co-host role in the studio. It'll be an interesting experience and very happy to be privileged to do the last one of the year.
It's different in person. I much prefer it in person, much more back and forth. What are we going to talk about today? Who knows? 2025 has been a rough year for Keir Starmer. We asked whether the Labour Party can survive, doing a bit of a retrospective. We will also, I suppose, surprisingly, you might think, we're going to discuss what we think is probably a Labour policy win to round up the year. Also, fake AI Yanis Varoufakis is going viral, which is, in a way, fake AI Yanis Varoufakis could be a good thing for us because we love getting him on. He's a very busy man, so we could probably get him on more often if this AI version of him just keeps getting more and more realistic. But obviously, there's some concerns around it. And Bernie Sanders has a message for the tech oligarchs. I'm impressed by it. They're a bit upset. We'll talk about that. As ever, if you'd like to support our work, you can sign up at novaramedia.com/support. As this is our last episode of the year, we're going to start by asking a simple question. Is this the year the Labour Party died? And we're going to start with some of the most obvious data points, really, which is the voting intention. So you can see here, what you can see in the two bars is how each of these parties were polling at the beginning of the year and how they're polling at the end of the year. So you can see it's been very bad for the Labour Party. At the beginning of the year, they were polling at 26%. They're now polling at 18%. Reform, have gone from strength to strength, from 25 to 28. The Conservatives, just like the Labour Party, haven't had a good year. 22 down to 17. The Lib Dems treading water. And then it's obviously the Greens who are the standout winners from the year. Obviously, Reform are up ahead, but in terms of gains, it's the Greens who've gone from 8 to 17. So you can see that big shift from the start of the year to the end of the year, looking very bad for Labour, looking relatively much better for the Greens, again, in terms of changes. The Labour brand has also been severely damaged this year. So this is how people felt about the political parties in January this year. So they weren't particularly keen on Labour then. 29% said they were favourable. This is to Ipsos. 50% were unfavourable. So they're on minus 21. Not great, but not disastrous. The Conservatives were already doing very, very badly at the beginning of this year on minus 37. Then you go to the end of the year. Now Labour have gone. So what were they on? They were on 29%. Now they're on 19%. So much less popular than they were. They were on minus 21. They're now on minus 37. So hasn't been a good year for them. Admission, I got those graphics from Stephen Bush's morning FT newsletter. So thank you, Stephen, if you're watching. Helena, can the Labour Party come back from this? Is this the year they died? It happens. We've seen it with PASOK, a centre-left party which has been a major dominant force for decades, can just disappear like that. Are we seeing that in 2025? Will that be this year's legacy?
I mean, we're certainly seeing it in terms of the mainstream parties losing huge amounts of support, right? Like, the question is also, can the Conservative Party come back from last year too? But it's still early doors. It's still technically early doors. Still 3.5 years until the next election. So whether or not that means that they're dead forever, unless they can show the public in these next 3.5 years that they can do what the public expects of them. The issue that they have, of course, is that they were never elected with any kind of grand vision on what the end goal of that 5 years in government might actually look like. So not only do they not have a specific base to be able to draw upon, because they try to pick and choose different parts of each voting cohort to build this kind of patchwork coalition that got them the huge majority because it was very well geographically distributed, right? The loveless landslide it was described as. And keeping everyone on side is difficult. And, well, it looks like they're kind of pinning all of their hopes on, well, just get us into government and we'll show you how good we can be for the electorate by replacing the Conservative Party, who saw economic decline, kind of stagnant living standards, on top of the fact that they had huge amounts of what were pretty easy own goals in terms of political corruption, political incompetence, and broken promises to the electorate. And the problem for Labour is they have all of those three latter things as well. They have been shown to be on the take in lots of cases. There have been scandals involving their personal conduct in office. And they've also had, on top of this, they've not actually seen the change that people wanted to see more broadly and those rising living standards. But I think it's interesting to point out as well, I actually was getting into this discussion on Twitter earlier today as well, which is that their tactic isn't necessarily to win over the voters that they've lost right now. I think certainly in the McSweeney camp, and certainly in the Blue Labour camp, that's at the top of the party, that's in its ascendancy, or that may be coming down if Keir Starmer resigns in May, that something could be on the cards after the local elections, is that they believe that the loss of most of their voting cohort, which is mostly to parties to ostensibly their left, at least on social values, Lib Dems to the right on economics, but the Greens are to the left on all facets of economic policy and on social policy too, that's triple that combined cohort of voters than they've lost to Reform UK. And so people look at this go, well, Labour are doing terribly. And I'm just like, well, as far as they're concerned, the voters they're trying to win over aren't those people they've lost to the Lib Dems and the Greens. It's the non-voters, which is where Reform are pulling all of their new votes from, right? A lot of ex-Tories are voting Reform on a bunch of other issues which Labour can never win these people back on. But they believe if they can crack down on migration numbers, which was a perceived failure from the Conservatives and something these non-voters who've come into the Reform fold care about, whilst also showing that they share some similar economic values that a lot of Reform voters, like half of the kind of Reform voter base, are at least amenable to. But we're not seeing the growth they promise, so living standards aren't going to rise in the way that they need to, unless they can pull a magic growth bunny out of the hat over the next 3.5 years. And I don't think that the Labour brand that's been kind of built over the last, 46 years, really, I guess 42 years, if you discount Michael Foot, of them being a middle ground party that are more kind of socially liberal, I don't think that's going to be able to be undermined in a 5-year term in office. So all those cultural values that Reform UK voters want, even if they are amenable to the economic arguments, aren't going to be satiated by them being, more draconian on asylum seekers if the vote numbers don't come down and if they don't totally rework what the base of the party and a lot of the MPs and the PLP look like, which clearly doesn't represent a lot of what the Blue Labour faction at the top looks like. I think they're going to struggle to really pull together a coherent voting cohort for the next election. And if they don't increase living standards, I think there's no way they'll win anybody back. And that seems to be the problems, I think, that look towards Labour dying in the future and not being able to rescue this unsalvageable position. Maybe a new leader can go to the steps in number 10, just symbolically burn a picture of Keir Starmer and go, it was a mistake, it's over, we're doing something totally new, and revamp the kind of really tattered image of what the Labour Party represents since the disability cuts, since the means testing of the winter fuel allowance, the two kind of original sins of this government. I think it's going to be really difficult for them to shift the needle much further than it's been shifted already.
And I suppose if they want to survive as a political party, it's not Reform, because I suppose their time in government, you can see how Reform is a big threat to that, because they could lose all of those red wall seats. But their existence as a political party, that's under threat from the Greens, not from Reform, in the same way that the Tories' existence as a political party is under threat from Reform, because you get eclipsed by people from your own side. Mm-hmm. So Labour's big problem, and especially their new problem this year, because obviously Reform were already a big problem last year, the new problem this year is from the Greens and Zach Polansky sort of just taking loads of, I suppose, the more liberal, younger Labour voters away from the Labour Party. Labour have struggled to work out their attack lines as well. They know he's a threat. They haven't quite worked out what to do about it. Josh Simons, MP, he was in charge of Labour Together. Very intelligent guy. I think he went to Oxford and then Harvard and was an academic. But this is all he could muster on his TikTok earlier this week.
Zach Polansky and nuclear power. Here's what you've not heard. We in this country haven't built nuclear for decades because lefties keep saying that if you build nuclear, the end of the world will follow. Zach Polansky is one of those people. That's why your energy bills are higher. That's why Putin's boot is on our throat right where he wants it. To solve that problem, we must go massive on nuclear. Zach Polansky is getting in the way.
So, I mean, I'm actually, on nuclear, I'm probably more in line with Josh Simons than I am with Zach Polansky, because I'm very much in favour of making it much, much easier to build nuclear, and I don't think that is the Green position. I don't know what Zach thinks personally about it, but I'm more in line with the Labour position on this. But if you're getting attacked from your left by the Greens, who are especially attacking you on values, then coming out and sort of making a video about horrible lefties ruining everything is a strange strategy, which Zach Polansky sort of jumped on. So in response to that video, Zach Polansky, sorry, shared the screenshot of him blaming lefties and saying, because lefties keep blah, 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 blah. And then Zach Polansky says, yet another crap video from another Labour MP attacking me and lefties, showing us exactly who they are. They serve only power and wealth. 2026, the year of people power. They do have a problem, because every time they attack Zach Polansky, they seem to do it on the basis of he's a lefty and we hate lefties. But the people who are going from Labour to the Greens are people who self-define as lefties. So the whole sort of strategy, which was let's bash some lefties to prove to reform-curious people that we're sane, is not really going to work now that you have some competition to your left. I suppose two questions. Do you think there's any logic behind what Josh Simons is doing? And if you were, I know you're a Green Party member, so you're a little bit, you've got conflicted interests here. But if you were advising the Labour Party on how to attack Zach Polansky, what do you think his actual weak points are? Because I think it's probably not nuclear.
I mean, I think there is some truth to the idea that this might be a reasonable attack line, because, again, this is anecdotal. Don't crucify me. I'm talking anecdotal evidence here. But one thing I hear incredibly often, I mean, so much so that Zach even brought this up in the Downstream interview that we did with him, was that people would come up to him and go, I'd love to vote for the Green Party, but I can't because you oppose nuclear. Now, I personally am in favour of building more nuclear. I think that whilst we should be focusing on cheaper renewables, because they're cheaper per kilowatt hour than nuclear is, and also don't have a lot of the problems in terms of nuclear waste. I do think that having some baseload capacity, I think that nuclear is good because it has a smaller footprint, so has less ecological disruption in terms of the land use, for example. Regardless, Zach said, well, if you disagree with our nuclear policy, come and join and you could vote on policy at conference. He seemed at the very least open to the Green Party changing that position, or at the very least it seems to not be one of his kind of red lines in terms of where the policy goes, as long as it stays broadly environmental in nature. And so I think like Josh Simons trying to lean into this is, it's reasonable, right? But you can't lean into it by saying, well, it's all the stupid lefties, right? You can't just insult the people that you're trying to win over, Unless, of course, what you say is correct, that it's supposed to be performative to the cohort of voters, like this new universe of voters that they're trying to kind of fuse together from where a lot of their votes have dropped, which is in red wall communities, which is in post-industrial areas, older demographic seats, right? Because we've got this huge demographic shift where the difference between the young seats and the old seats is wider, both politically and in terms of their geography, than it's ever been, right? And the old constituencies are very old now. But in terms of how we can actually win people over from the left, from people who've defected to the Greens, or indeed potentially to the Liberal Democrats. Again, on social issues, I still think that the Lib Dems are to the right of Labour on the economy. Do better policy, probably be my best advice to the Labour Party. Like, one of the things, the three big things, really, that are pushing people away from Labour to parties to their left, or in some, I guess on social issues, they're losing to the Greens and Lib Dems because, they're being pretty conservative and a bunch of things, moving away from the socially liberal values that they feel has disconnected them from those heartland communities, right? And that is total, electoral toxin for city-dwelling, metropolitan, left-wing, especially younger voters, right? In terms of them trying to thread the needle on trans rights, or being incredibly draconian on migration. That's pushing away loads of people. They should probably just try and avoid these as much as possible rather than making immigration a salient issue, but that's their strategy, whatever. And you probably have to get someone who's a little bit more charismatic than Keir Starmer, who, even if he had vision, even if he had kind of guiding lights in terms of his idea of what the country should or shouldn't look like, I don't believe that he does. But even if he did, Does anyone know? Would anyone know would anyone believe him if he said so? Because he's lied his way to being where he is, both to his party's MPs and the electorate. And people don't forget dishonesty. That's ultimately why Boris Johnson never recovered, right? He lied to the public and they went, okay, it's gone. This is a level of betrayal that we're not amenable to. And the betrayal of the left, internally within the Labour Party and externally to the electorate, I think that unless you have this kind of real kind of symbolic reset of what Labour looks like, because everyone really kind of secretly knows it's Keir Starmer and his faction that have gotten Labour to this point. Like, we've changed Labour. If you don't like it, you can leave. They already sowed the seeds of this rebellion ages ago, and it's going to take a lot more than just a different rhetorical focus or different kinds of TikTok videos from MPs like Josh Simons to win these people back. Because actually young people think about them as being very kind of frivolous in terms of policy, but actually they're pretty clued in. They really do care about what the material policy looks like, and until that changes, I don't think they're going to win anyone back.
I'm going to put forward what my argument would be if I were the Labour Party. With the proviso, I agree with you, it's over for Keir Starmer. So it would have to be, under a new leader, how do they reset the party with a different message and say, this is why you should vote Labour, not Greens. I'm going to go to a graphic. I hope I put the right one in this time. So this is from More in Common, and it's showing, I suppose, where each of the parties are picking up their votes. And you can see from here, the Greens, they're rising a little bit in some of these groups, but the real progress they've made is among progressive activists. And what you're looking at here, so More in Common, what pollsters often do is they segment the population into these different categories based on their values and their answers to different questions. So you've got progressive activists, incrementalist left, established liberals, skeptical scrollers, rooted patriots, traditional conservatives, dissenting disruptors. This is sort of from marketing, where you sort of segment the public and you try and sell them different things. But this is being done for the purpose of political polling. And you can see the Greens are doing really, really well among progressive activists. So people who like Corbyn, people who use social media, people who are very liberal, very left-wing. The problem is that's only 12% of the public. And if I were the new leader of the Labour Party, if I were Andy Burnham or whoever, I would say, look, the Greens have been very effective at winning a set proportion of the public who we have great respect for, who are brilliant people, but we have to be real, but that what they believe isn't shared by a majority in this country. And we, unlike the Greens, are a party who are committed to appealing to the whole country and winning a majority. So, all power to Zach Polansky for bringing these issues up and getting some sort of interesting ideas onto the table. But if you want a serious party that can beat reform, and not, I don't think you should do the Hillary Clinton thing of saying, well, a vote for them is a vote for reform, because you don't want it to be blackmail. But what you want to say is, what we're doing isn't just saying it's us or worse. You're saying we're doing the politically valuable thing, which is to try, politics is about building coalitions, and we're the only party that are genuinely interested in building a broad-based coalition. And Zach Polansky and the Greens are yet to prove that, and actually they're yet to prove they've got any interest in that. And I think that would be what an Andy Burnham or whoever comes next. I think even Wes Streeting could do it if he tried, because lots of people on the left have a lot of issue with him, but I think in the wider public, no one knows that he used to be in Progress and was on the Labour right. This is very internal stuff. So I think if the next Labour leader came out and did that, there would be lots of people who are Green voters who might think, yeah, I kind of see what you're saying there. I don't know. What do you think?
I think there's a potential for that. I think one thing that would be necessary is some level of contrition. I think people would want an apology. I think that's one thing that has kind of been marked about this. It was kind of seen in Josh Simon's video there, is that they kind of just treat the left with contempt and have done right from the start. Again, this idea that we don't need to pander to them, we don't need to offer them anything because they'll have nowhere else to go. And they said, well, the door's open, you can leave, and they all left. It's going to have to say, actually, these are people who are part of our coalition, and we took them for granted. And far from take them for granted, we told them to go away. We told them, we don't want you, we don't need you. We'll be able to win with middle-income Mondeo men from Stevenage or whatever it is, or from Saffron Walden. And if they actually want these people to come back, they have to apologise. I think that's one thing they have to do. But I think again, a big part of that would have to be saying, well, the problem with how we got into this position is because we allowed outside influence to come into what should be a party rooted in Labour values, right? And that's what, even though I think there are some, you've seen from the Employment Rights Bill that those Labour values haven't totally deserted where the party is. The apparatchiks as part of the Politburo, the McSweeney Politburo at the top, realise they can't offer nothing to the left wing of the Labour Party. They can't offer nothing to the trade unionists of the Labour Party. They have to offer something. The question is that will it be enough? And will they be able to get over people who, again, you look at those attitudes towards Labour, this isn't kind of passive, oh, well, I'm not going to this party because I've made this kind of utilitarian calculation about what their policies will do for me. There's just this kind of visceral disgust at the Labour Party. You don't get to, minus 37 was it, approval rating, without people really, really hating you, really, really not liking you. And Keir Starmer's approval is minus 50 something, right? It's really in the toilet. And so just a change in direction I don't think will be enough, as I said. The pitch has to come from, we're sorry we did this, and we're sorry about what happened up until the point where Keir Starmer left the leadership. If they get drubbed at the May elections when it's clear this cohort isn't coming back anytime soon, it's going to take rebuilding that kind of link, which will be difficult. I think it will be difficult, but I understand where you're coming from.
Someone in the comments has asked, can we hear how big each of these groups are? As I said, these are artificial constructs because they're sort of, it's how people in marketing segment the population to sort of put them into somewhat arbitrary groups. But I'll give you the numbers because they're interesting. So progressive activists are 12% of the public. Incremental left are 21%. Established liberals are 9%, which is why sort of the David Cameronite thing isn't really working anymore. Skeptical scrollers, which is 10%. I don't quite know what that means. Rooted patriots, so it's clear who that is, 20%. Lots of them. Traditional conservatives, 8%. And then dissenting disruptors, the populist right, 20%. So you can see sort of the Brexit voters are the sort of rooted patriots, dissenting disruptors. I did the poll yesterday to find out which one I was in. Can you guess? Which of those you...
Progressive activist?
Yeah, I thought I might be incrementalist left. But no, I am firmly in the progressive activist.
Me too, likewise.
Box.
Wow, Novara Media clan, we're in the progressive activist.
Well, because it had in brackets Social Democrat, and I was like, well, I'm kind of an incrementalist left Social Democrat guy.
Corbynism is social democracy anyway.
Yeah. I mean, I am compared to the population, I am definitely a progressive activist, whatever some of our regular viewers might think. The Labour Party has alienated a lot of people this year, but there's one group of activists who are ending the year delighted with Keir Starmer's government. They're called the YIMBYs. So YIMBYs, for those unfamiliar, it stands for Yes in My Backyard. They're people who want to reduce the barriers to building new homes. They're opposed to NIMBYs, not in my backyard. Now, on Tuesday, the YIMBY Alliance celebrated Housing Minister Matthew Woodcock announcing what the group have called the biggest ever reforms to national policy to deliver more homes. So the biggest ever, not the biggest ever since this or that, just the biggest ever. This was Matthew Pennycook announcing that policy.
As well as setting out national planning policy in a clearer and more comprehensive manner, we're proposing a number of substantive reforms to boost housing supply and unlock economic growth in the years ahead. They include the following: a permanent presumption in favour of sustainable development, building on the proposals outlined in our Brownfield Passport working paper to make development of suitable land in urban areas acceptable by default. A default yes for suitable proposals for development land around rail stations within existing settlements and around well-connected stations outside settlements, including on Greenbelt land.
Okay, so I admit MPs talking about planning regulations isn't exactly thrilling television. That's why I didn't show you any more of that clip. You know, all respect to Matthew Pennycook, but I don't think you can make that exciting in Parliament. But let's go to the YIMBY Alliance. Sort of, they've put together their explanation for what's in this and why they're so excited. So they say homes within walking distance of train stations well connected to jobs will be allowed so long as they have a minimum density of 50 homes per hectare. This also applies across the green belt. This will have a huge impact. So that does seem like quite a big deal. So at the moment, it's very difficult to get planning permission, especially in the green belt. This is saying if you're close to a train station, which means that you're a well-connected place, build the goddamn house. The next one they like that they've shared, they say permission for additional buildings on existing plots so long as they take no more than twice the footprint of the original house. This will allow densification with mid-rise blocks of flats in back gardens. Here's an example before and after from the Croydon Design Guide. So you can see there on the left, that's a house with a big garden, and now it's become a bigger house with a smaller garden. And that will be, or I suppose a block of flats with a smaller garden. That will now sort of automatically be welcomed by planning committees. I'm very much in favour of densification. London is a very undense place compared to any other sort of major international cities. So I think the idea that we can go a bit higher is good. They say smaller plots will also be exempted from biodiversity requirements. So unless you're a huge development, you don't have to, care about newts. There will be fewer constraints on what the inside of buildings can look like. Sam Dimitru, who I think we've had on this show, he's head of policy at Britain Remade, said this about the announced changes to planning rules. The government could easily exceed its 1.5 million home target for the Parliament just by building near stations in London and the South East. And that doesn't even adjust for the higher densities sought in urban areas. If it survives consultation, and you best believe there will be an almighty fight, it will be the single most powerful pro-supply move in post-war Britain. This is radical by British standards, but there is precedent. New Zealand's most expensive cities have built at a clip since successive governments brought in measures to create a similar default yes to densification near city centres and busy transport corridors. One study suggested that over 6 years, the policy cut Auckland's rents by nearly a third. If the same happened in the capital, the average Londoner would save £9,000 each year. Helena, I have you down as a YIMBY. Are you happy about this?
I think it's anything that we can kind of lever that we can pull to get us closer to this 1.5 million house target is a good thing in my mind. The fact that these changes kind of are specifically, it seems to be done to get through YIMBY proposals without treading on the toes of the NIMBYs in a way that they would find really egregious, so that it can kind of toe that line with making some default yeses for new housing construction whilst being able to kind of preempt some objections. So, for example, saying, well, if it's in this kind of, is this far away from a railway station, a transport link, for example, no one's going to say, well, there was some really good greenery around this train station, because obviously these are usually pretty built up areas. This is usually areas where there's not going to be so much biodiversity that you're going to be harming by building around places like train stations. I'm glad about this. Higher densification is 100% what I'm glad with, because again, if you care about efficient land use, if you care about trying to minimize more nature depletion, because we are an incredibly nature depleted country, ensuring that the YIMBY kind of policies that you're putting forward are things that are prioritizing density so we can maximize the number of units, the amount of people that we can house, for the amount of space that we can use. That's a way of ensuring that you can bring down prices, you actually have more levels of accommodation whilst not overusing land space, which is at a premium in this country right now. So I'm glad about that. I'd like to see a lot more of kind of zoning policy in this country. I think, again, a big problem that we have is NIMBYs will just look at something and they'll go, oh, well, we don't mind new houses, but there's not going to be a new school, there's not going to be a new hospital, there's not going to be new amenities in the area, because, of course, councils are strapped for cash. The state doesn't seem to have anyone with the expertise in-house, because in the neoliberal period, these people all just kind of left and joined consultancies to go, which do whatever the developers want. That the objection can be overruled in good zoning laws and zoning rules by ensuring, well, we're going to get some local buy-in by saying, okay, we're going to let you choose where the thing goes. Like, you'll have local consent on where you want to put these zones for all these different amenities or for the residential accommodation, right? But it's got to go somewhere. Yeah. Right, it's got to go somewhere. We're going to have this level of expansion that we will at least get people to acquiesce to, especially if it's densified and it's not being done to overdevelop into places that are kind of naturally important, so people don't lose access to important green space. But also go like, well, you can't block these because they're dense because you're caring about your personal property values, which I actually think is the case for most NIMBYs. Lots of NIMBYs will try and play the environmentalist card. And I'm like, a lot of these things, as far as I can see, are actual concerns about property values, not concerns about environmental degradation, which is, of course, a real concern, right? The issue I think they're going to come up with is they talk about the including of the green belt here. And in people's minds, they hear green belt and they hear nature rather than what it actually is, which is just the dimensions laid out in the TCPA, which, they probably should get rid of. They probably should get rid of the TCPA, but there's no way anyone would win an election off of...
What's that, the Town, Country and Planning Act?
Yeah. And lots of green belt is actually just not green in the slightest. It's a real
I think
misnomer.
even if it is green, even if it's a field that grows, whatever. I think a few houses are. We've got quite a lot of fields. That's always my position.
Given what the farmers
I'm not
did,
running for election.
Well, given what the farmers said when we tried to give them a slightly less incredibly generous tax break.
This will be amazing for the farmers because the land they own will suddenly become a lot more valuable than it was before.
That is true. And then it means they can sell it and pay their inheritance tax with it.
That's two policies in one. As I say, I think this policy is good. I don't think it's going to be a silver bullet. This is the problem. So this was a useful piece in the Financial Times around a month ago, which I've been meaning to speak about for a while. So it says, new homes, even if you build them, there's no one to buy them. And it's by Neil Hudson, who is a sort of housing analyst. Now, in the article, he says this: planning does need reform, but the reason why not enough homes are being built is because not enough homes are being bought. Volume house builders, which typically build houses rather than flats, only build them as fast as they can sell them. And developers who build blocks of flats need to sell a large proportion off-plan before they can even get the finance to start construction. So while a huge number of people need a home, there are fewer people who can actually afford to buy one in the current housing market due to higher mortgage rates and the difficulty of saving for a deposit. The former is measured in the millions, the latter, measured at market sale completions, is probably stuck at around 120,000 a year across England. Now, this is really important, I think, and why the government are in a bind, and it's difficult. There isn't an easy answer because basically we need, for houses to become affordable, we need them to fall in price. But if you allow houses to fall in price, then there are going to be a lot of voters who own homes who are going to be very annoyed. And there's going to be people in negative equity, which does have a problematic effect for the economy because then they stop spending. So there is a real problem with allowing house prices to fall. But house builders know that. So house builders know that probably at some point the government is going to step in and boost demand, which is what governments have usually done when we don't have enough sort of houses or when people are struggling to get on the property ladder. They say, okay, we'll give you some support with your mortgage, which is always criticized because it's saying what you're doing is you're pumping up demand when actually the problem is supply.
The meme, I just need to subsidize demand.
I just need to subsidize. That's the meme. But the reason they do it is because landowners and developers know that governments will never let them fall. So if they're looking depressed at the moment, which they are compared to sort of a few years ago, then they're just waiting for the government to pump up supply before they start building. And so, I mean, what Neil Hudson is saying is that probably they will come up with some kind of help to buy next year because they realize that even if we make it easy to build all these houses, all these people are going to say, well, I'm still going to sit on this land until the house prices go up again, which surely they will, because that's the only way that parties win elections in this country. So I don't know, what do you think?
I mean, again, pumping up the mortgage market even more is certainly something that I would be skeptical of. I mean, it just shows the problem of when you just leave all of this up to private sector and private markets. Insofar as if we were building lots of housing, but it was, say, council housing, it wouldn't matter if there was a buyer. First of all, because it would get built anyway, because it's done by government contract. Or you could have a state-owned developer, nod to the Green Party there, sorry, got a shill once per stream. But when it comes to finding a buyer, you don't need to. The government is guaranteeing that there is a purchase for the actual property itself, and they'll put people in the houses straight away because there's a million-long person wait for council housing. And luckily, under the current set of, or at least under the first fiscal rule, the Rachel Reeves assert herself, which is that day-to-day spending is covered by tax receipts, but they're happy to increase borrowing if that's going on an asset. And what's a better asset that will guarantee returns forever is housing. It's why it's an infinite money glitch for landlords, right? It could be so that for the state, rather than having to subsidise private rents, they would be getting rents in, especially to cash-strapped local authorities, through an expansion in council housing. The problem, of course, is that there is the second fiscal rule, which is about the future debt to GDP ratio and what the OBR predicts, right? So there's this whole mess before the budget, because the OBR's prediction about where the debt looks like it will be in 5 years' time being revised up and down based on productivity projections that, as far as I can see, are read in the tea leaves. And so they kind of hit that limit in how much that they can speculatively borrow for new assets, which is all going into other things other than council housing. But again, I don't mind them putting more money into Help to Buy if that's what's necessary to provide the liquidity for the market that would make the private developers build. But it just shows you the limits in terms of what are kind of the more libertarian style YIMBYs would say around the necessity of, of just deregulating and inshallah, because that won't get you as far as the way in terms of, well, people in this country don't have money to spend. And they don't have money to spend in part because we're in this position in that we turned our economy that used to be productive businesses, it used to be collections of small businesses trading within communities, and we became a housing market and a financial market and a retirement home all in one. And none of these things are conducive to having a reasonably affluent middle class who have the ability to be able to borrow, to be able to buy a house. We have a whole generation of people locked out of home ownership. And that's because we have made these things into revenue generating assets rather than what the actual use value is, because of things like right to buy and over financialization and the failures of quantitative easing in the 2010s, because all of that quantitative easing went into financial assets or went into the housing market. It's why people like Lloyds have been out there, buying residential homes, because they know that the value can only go up because we have this private housing system, this privatized housing system, where it's seen as an asset that cannot drop in value. So it seems like they're in a real bind in terms of housing affordability, when to be able to make it affordable, they have to pump extra liquidity into the market via demand subsidy to get people onto the housing ladder, and that becomes a cyclical problem. There will have to be a point, as far as I can see, where we have to go, well, tough. It's tough if you don't want to go into negative equity. If we want to continue this without just having, what we're seeing now, and with millennials becoming an inheritocracy, where, well, if you're born into a family where you're wealthy enough for your parents not to have to sell their house to be able to pay for social care in old age, you're not getting on the housing ladder without significantly high incomes, because that's what Help to Buy does by pushing up prices, right? You can, as a high income earner, you can afford a mortgage affordability assessment because your monthly income is high, but you might not be able to afford a deposit because it's difficult to put that money together when the actual nominal price of the house is high. Government gives you money. It's a real sop to middle and upper middle class, upwardly mobile people. Terrible for working class people because they can't pass the mortgage affordability assessment criteria, regardless of how much money the government puts in up front for them to get the deposit. So need more council housing, as far as I can see.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. That's the difference between a left NIMBY,
a chimby,
a left YIMBY, and a right YIMBY. So a right YIMBY just says deregulate everything, whatever the consequences, and hope for the best. And a left NIMBY, I think, says, yeah, a bit of deregulation probably fine, but you're going to need a massive role for the state.
Well, it's why people call, when people ask me, am I a YIMBY or a NIMBY? I say, I'm a chimby.
And why
a council housing in my backyard.
Oh, I like that. The reason I had that little smile halfway through your answer is because I was also looking at some of the comments, and someone was annoyed about me talking about the environment. I don't think we should build on virgin forest, by the way, but farmland isn't actually that sort of environmentally valuable most of the time. It's monocultural, it's often pesticides used. It's not exactly like an area which is brilliant for wildlife. So I'm in favor of lots of rewilding, but also if you want to give over a few fields for some desperately needed housing, I'm very much in favor of that. The United States is ramping up its military pressure against Venezuela, but what's the real story behind the conflict? I caught up earlier today with friend of the show, Yanis Varoufakis.
What's happening in the Caribbean right now is the most shocking geopolitical collapse I've witnessed in my 30-year career as an economist. America deployed its largest military force to Latin America since the Cuban Missile Crisis. The result? Maduro was sworn in for a third term and Washington lost control. Let me tell you something. This story isn't just about Venezuela. This is the operational manual for the decline of an empire. And right now, this manual is being written, published, and distributed to the world in real time. The force America has deployed to the Caribbean since August, these numbers will make your head spin.
What a fantastic answer. Yanis, great to have you on. Of course, that wasn't the real Yanis Varoufakis. It was completely AI generated. Apparently, though, that wasn't clear to everyone. So you can see here the fun for that story. They've got great farms going on. Massive defeat. Yanis Varoufakis looking furious, which is why so many people have watched this. So the title is How Venezuela Survived America's Attack. And it's got 144,000 views in under a day. We came across that video and a bunch of other fake Yanis videos after someone tweeted about a channel full of videos sort of purporting to be from the former Greek finance minister, or he's still Greek, but the Greek former finance minister of Greece. Let's go to that tweet. Hi, Yanis Varoufakis. Are you aware that this YouTube channel has an entire deepfake AI-generated series of you explaining macroeconomics? They use your name, your voice, and twist your ideas. The most popular video has 800,000 views. And so this is a screenshot of the video that has 800,000 views. So you can see that every nation is in debt. So who's the lender? Good question. But the answer was completely AI generated. Nearly 1 million views in 3 weeks. Yanis Varoufakis' response was interesting as well. So he said this. Yes, I know, nothing I can do about it. YouTube refuses to take these deepfakes down, and even if they do, they spring up faster than I can shut them down. I suppose we must all learn to doubt all we see and hear. Perhaps this is the beginning of social media's self-immolation. Interesting hypothesis there, sort of, instead of us all becoming incredibly gullible and sort of getting completely confused about what is what, maybe we just all turn away from it and say, I can't believe any of this, so I'm going to turn off my social media. Probably would be a good outcome. Since that tweet from Yanis Varoufakis, that particular channel has been taken down, but by this morning, there was a new version of it that had already been created. So you can see here, this is the sharp line. Yeah, you can see here, these don't have many views, but that's because they just recreated this and uploaded everything again in 24 hours. You can see all of these. We do need, I'm very much, I said to the team today, our farms need to look more like that because they are very entertaining, and that's why they're, well, these ones aren't getting many views because they've only just been uploaded, but why some of them were getting 800,000 views. Helena, Yanis said this could be the beginning of social media's self-immolation. I think that would be the better outcome here. I mean, what do you think?
I mean, it's really difficult to be able to look at huge numbers of people being extremely easily fooled by what seems to us as obviously AI-generated videos with books without real titles, just jumbles of squiggly lines that don't actually represent letters. If 800,000 people can watch that and it's not immediately obvious that it's a deepfake, then we're in real trouble in the form of how we can present ourselves on the internet, especially as public figures, which I guess I am now. It's scary. That anyone could do this to anybody, and if YouTube waits, until all these videos have racked up all of these views before they take it down, someone who's watched that video, taken this as being Yanis Varoufakis' obvious opinion, and then they've not revisited it to find out because it's come up on the algorithm and gone away again, then they could come up with a totally incorrect perception of what Yanis's views are. Because I believe that if this Who's the Lender video is about modern monetary theory, I don't think Yanis is an MMT guy, as far as I'm aware, and that's really dangerous for public figures. And I think that if YouTube aren't acting on this now, that's a real trouble. If not for us, it's trouble for YouTube. One of YouTube's kind of key selling features, or at least they keep telling me in their creator emails, is that we value the authenticity of the platform and the authenticity of the fact that we're just a platform. We allow creators the freedom to be able to connect with their audience. And how can you expect people like us or Yanis Varoufakis, who has his own YouTube output? He runs a political party. Has effects politically for Greece if his party shoots up in the polls. And people want to vote for him based off of ideas that aren't even his because they've seen a video that's been deepfaked of him. That connection between creator and audience gets completely severed. And that's a problem for YouTube and the creators on it as well, as people won't be able to take the platform seriously anymore. The alarm is sounded with good reason in this one, I think.
And it's important to note, I suppose, because there are two different ways this could be done, right? Where you're doing a deep fake of a prominent person, which is, you could have a sort of political objective. So maybe to discredit them, or maybe to start a riot, or to sort of put forward your views with a more credible face. My guess from this is that this is someone who just wanted to clock up views so they could get ad revenue. Because I don't think they were sort of, it didn't seem to me like this had a political agenda beyond sort of thinking, oh, people like Yanis Varoufakis videos, so I'm going to get my generative AI to create a load of Yanis Varoufakis videos without having to ask Yanis Varoufakis. As I say, there are loads of these. I'm just going to show you one more clip. This is another Yanis Varoufakis video, well, fake Yanis Varoufakis video with 28,000 views.
I want to tell you about something that sounds like a riddle, or perhaps more accurately, for years, we've been told that the silver market is functioning normally, that prices reflect supply and demand, that what gets traded every day represents actual metal sitting somewhere in vaults.
And I wanted to go to some of the comments because you can see that, well, I don't know, I'm going to bring up something else. So let's read some of these comments. So Mr. K9 Funder says, "You are on a roll, sir. Facts from astute economist. JP Morgan, the great silver paper manipulator via naked short. They got caught, moved their trade desk to Singapore, and going long after years of short paper is real indicator of silver to the moon." Now, I don't know if that's probably a bot. Is it a fake Yanis Varoufakis being viewed by fake YouTube accounts? Let's go to Mark DeGroen. This one sounds a bit more real. "Thank you, Yanis. If I read you correctly, you are saying don't trust paper value in any form, only the physical things they can buy. I will bunker up and await the inevitable hyperinflation we are heading for. May ordinary hard-working people heed your warning and avoid starvation in the coming years." Well, that is quite a stark conclusion to come from a fake video of an economist that you like. But yeah, the strange sort of meta angle here is because with all of these things, you never know if these are real people who have been fooled or if they are bots who are pretending to be fooled to generate more engagement for the video. This is the sort of information apocalypse when it comes to AI and the internet, because you don't know if the video is real, you don't know if the reaction to it's real, you don't know if all those views are real or if it was bots that went to watch it. Although if it's bots that are going to watch it, actually, I wonder if you probably can get ad revenue if you've got a bot to watch it, I would imagine. That's an interesting question. Anyway, let's go to a real person who we do know is a real person, who was fooled this week by what I think was clearly generative AI. This is Carol Malone. She's a Daily Express columnist. She can often be found on the Jeremy Vine show on Channel 5. I've debated her a couple of times. On Thursday, she tweeted this. So you can see here, "Who does this to a puppy, for God's sake? Thank God for this man." Let's look at the video, which, according to Carol Malone, is documenting the best and the worst of humanity.
Come on, good boy.
So, I mean, there were some key videos. So, as you pointed out while we were watching that, Helena, the car door closed itself. Also, the sound that dog made when it ate the food wasn't particularly convincing. But the bigger problem is this. When the man abandoned the dog, who was taking the video? Who was filming the abandonment?
I mean, for me, it was when the dog goes like this, like the bit in Team America's like, "It's me, it's me."
But I suppose this does show, I suppose Carol Malone, a boomer, I suppose, especially it's when you're on a small screen, in defense of Carol Malone, she probably watched that quickly on her phone, on a small screen, maybe with the sound off. She also, I suppose part of her sort of, her modus operandi is to sort of say, these people are terrible. She likes to whip up sort of anger about various people. So I suppose she saw this as an opportunity. But how worrying is it that someone can watch that and think, this is not only terrible, I'm going to tweet about this. I'm going to tweet about how outrageous this is without thinking, who was taking the video when the dog was abandoned? Who abandons a dog when there's someone filming right there? I suppose it could have been a speed camera.
I mean, it's just sad when you introduce that, going, "Oh, Carol Malone is definitely real." I'm like, oh no, so she's not just elaborate performance art warning about early onset dementia. But I mean, yeah, it's just, we had this debate last week about the social media ban for kids under 16. I'm like, and at the time I was like, oh, we can't do that. I'm like, I will now rescind my position. And I'll go further, ban everyone who's not between the age of 20 and 45 from social media, because we have a real problem. I mean, she boomer posts very heavily on Twitter. I see, but just even seriously though, as you say, what she probably has done is not paid huge amounts of attention, just seen dog go, "Oh, well, this is upsetting, isn't it? Retweet, how sad," rather than spending, having to spend some amount of time checking whether something is AI. Because there was somebody, in a more serious note, somebody was sharing AI pictures from Gaza that were purporting to show them filming kids being in an inundated tent, because there's obviously lots of floods in Gaza at the moment, right? And they were tweeting out these pictures as if they were totally real. And they were certainly more real than a dog waving its arms, but they were clearly AI. And you upload them to an AI detector and it will say so. And so someone, again, could be sharing that with just as little attention to checking whether it's been AI generated or not, as Carol Malone was with that dog video. And that's real harmful misinformation. That, again, unless you're attentively checking that everything that you're watching or that you're looking at or everything that's coming across your feed, whether it's real or fake, like, and most people aren't going to be using the internet with that level of due diligence, regardless of how good they are at being able to spot it if they actually are looking. And that's going to be a huge issue, I guess, as I think, as this technology fails to be regulated, really, or regulated to the level that's necessary to be able to use the internet and be able to function properly.
Just to preempt any charges of ageism, I've met Carol Malone. I don't think she's suffering from dementia. I just think she's a bit gullible and also likes to whip up anger.
I mean, that's why they keep getting her on, right? It's because she continually tries to.
She likes to rile
angry.
people up.
I mean, she knows how to get the clips. You know, she certainly gets booked more often than you and your very nuanced and polite takes do.
But I think she's sharp as a fiddle. It's perhaps an irony that one of the few Congress people in the United States to take artificial intelligence really seriously is also one of the oldest. And 84-year-old Bernie Sanders this week delivered this call to arms.
Who is aggressively pushing these technologies? Well, surprise, surprise. It happens to be the very wealthiest people on earth, people like Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos, Mark Zuckerberg, Peter Thiel, Bill Gates, and other multi-billionaires. So here is a very simple question I'd like you to think about. Do you believe that these guys, these multi-billionaires, are staying up nights worrying about what AI and robotics will do to the working families of our country and the world? If AI and robotics eliminate millions of jobs and create massive unemployment, how will people survive if they have no income? And I don't want to break the bad news to you, I know it won't shock you, but very few members of Congress are seriously thinking about this. Millions of kids in this country are becoming more and more isolated from real human relationships and are getting their emotional support from AI. Think for a moment about a future when human beings are not interacting with each other and are spending virtually all of their time with devices instead of people. We need all of our people involved in determining the future of AI, and not just a handful of multi-billionaires. That is why, for a start, I will be pushing for a moratorium on the construction of data centers that are powering this unregulated sprint to develop and deploy AI.
So Bernie Sanders' message wasn't that we should sort of oppose artificial intelligence outright, but rather that we need to slow down its development so that democracy has a chance to catch up with this revolutionary technology. I think he's absolutely right. I think he put the case really well. I think sort of making this about children's mental health and our social lives as well as jobs is really, really important. That's a great way to sort of build a big coalition. There has been lots of pushback from some of the usual suspects. So David Sachs is a Silicon Valley venture capitalist and Trump's chief AI advisor, so no potential conflicts of interest there. He said this in response to Bernie. Bernie makes clear that the debate over AI is not about states' rights or affordability. He would block new data centers even if states want them and they generate their own power. It's about stopping progress completely so China wins the AI race. Thank you for your honesty, Senator. Now, the argument that the US couldn't possibly slow down because then China would win the AI race ignores the fact that the strongest racing dynamics, if you're worried about how fast this is all going, it's not because of US versus China, it's because of American companies versus American companies. So this is from Statista. So in 2025, Meta is projected to spend £72 billion, on AI. which is mainly data centers. That's the capital expenditure. Alphabet will spend 93 billion. Microsoft will spend 88 billion. And Amazon will spend 120 billion. So that's so much money, right? Meanwhile, according to JP Morgan, the combined capital expenditure on AI by China's 4 largest tech firms, so that's ByteDance, Alibaba, Tencent, and Baidu, is forecast to be just below 50 billion. So sort of the 4 big Chinese AI firms are spending sort of half what a single American AI firm is spending. The total is sort of less than a sixth of the total amount being spent in the United States. So if there is a current risk from the speed of AI development is coming from the Americans, not the Chinese. So the idea we can't possibly slow down because then the Chinese would overtake us. You're the ones racing. Elon Musk also took a break from spreading white supremacist talking points, often vague, to put forward a more idealistic take on Bernie's arguments. So we can read here, the future is going to be amazing with AI and robots enabling sustainable abundance for all. Earlier this year, Musk had expanded on what that would look like. So he said this, there will be universal high income, not merely basic income. Everyone will have the best medical care, food, home, transport, and everything else. Sustainable abundance. Now that, of course, sounds wonderful. Maybe we should be really grateful that the world's richest man, potentially one of the world's most powerful people, wants such a great future for us all. Although, should we believe him? Bernie Sanders filmed a direct response to Elon Musk.
Hello, Elon Musk. This is Senator Bernie Sanders. I was delighted to hear that through the rapid advancement in artificial intelligence and robotics that you are funding, you will be bringing about utopia to the world. You have told us that poverty will be wiped out, work will be optional, there will be universal high income, and that everyone will have the best medical care, food, home, transport, and everything else. That is wonderful news. I just have a couple of questions. How will this utopia come about? If young people can't find the entry-level jobs that used to exist, and they are unemployed without income, when are they going to get the free housing you talk about? If manufacturing workers lose their jobs because robots take their place, when are they going to get the free health care you promise? If a young nurse with kids loses her job, how is she going to get the food she needs to feed her family? I look forward to hearing about how you and your other oligarch friends are going to provide working people with a magnificent life that you promise. Because let's not forget, Donald Trump, the guy you got elected, is kicking 15 million people off their health care, doubling insurance premiums for more than 20 million, and is making massive cuts to nutrition assistance and education for kids across the country. With that track record, I can't wait to hear how your plan to provide universal high income for every American is going to be implemented. Have a nice day.
Have a nice day. I love Bernie Sanders. Kind of everything about him. Let's talk about those arguments being put forward by Bernie Sanders. He's saying a pause on data centers. Now, obviously, there is an argument that sort of, can you pause them in one country? But if you could pause them in one country, America would definitely be the place to start. And I think this is really important for getting this on the table and starting a big democratic debate, because it is the case that sort of polling on this, people don't like the big AI companies. They're not that happy about the idea of their kid getting therapy from ChatGPT or becoming best friends with ChatGPT. And, you know, I think some of the water stuff is a bit overblown, but the electricity from the data centers, that does seem to be an issue. I think it is actually how this will be used, though, which is a bigger deal than the resources it's using up in the making of it. And his argument to say, okay, Elon Musk, you say we're going to have UBI, fabulous, then why are you supporting the president who's actually cutting people's benefits? Because I don't trust you about the UBI thing in this distant, wonderful future if in the present what you're doing is cutting people's Medicare or supporting the guy who's cutting people's Medicare. Your take?
I mean, there is actually, what's interesting is there's not necessarily a divergence ideologically between a small stater, which is clearly what Elon Musk is, in terms of his ideology. The whole Doge thing was just, we need to cut wasteful government spending. We believe people can spend their money better. That's the libertarian ideology that he purports to support. And of course, the original kind of progenitors of universal basic income were the Chicago Boys. It was Milton Friedman and their form of the negative income tax, essentially, was their position, right? But I don't think in the world that the tech bro oligarchs have in their head, it's the government that's administering a universal basic income or a universal high income, as Elon Musk calls it. I believe in this kind of Peter Thiel and Curtis Yarvin world of oligarchs that have subsumed the role of the state. They will be the ones who choose how to dole this out, right? I think that's what in their mind's eye they have, is that because obviously rich people have this really overinflated sense of their own importance and their own skill and their own
benevolence.
And their own benevolence also true, absolutely. And that's why they get this kind of like these delusions of grandeur that we can do anything that the state can do and we can do it better because we're the special people, because we've proven that we are by how rich we are, because that's the single metric under capitalism that determines social worth. It's just how much money you've got, what's your net worth. And I think they'll say, well, we'll be able to ones to administer the universal high income, right? They'll be the ones doing it. And of course, as was pointed out by Bernie Sanders, well, first of all, I don't think anyone really trusts that that's something that would happen in the end. They would get to that point and go, actually, I kind of like having all this money. I'm going to like having this. So I don't think that would happen. But broadly, Sanders is right, is that there is this, what we're seeing in the job market at the moment, we're seeing entry-level jobs being subsumed by AI, young people getting into the workplace or trying to get into the workplace and finding that the jobs that they need to gain the experiences necessary for the jobs that don't get subsumed by AI, non-existent, it's not there. So that's going to be a real problem. And of course, it's not so much of a problem if you have a central state who's being able to prop this up, or indeed, if those workers own those AI companies that are giving those productivity gains collectively, and then they're reaping the dividends from the productivity gains through ownership, even if they're not doing it through labor. And so there is a world where we can use what AI can do, also what robotics can do, I guess, because there's manual stuff that has replaced a lot of manufacturing jobs already. People go, well, we've transferred a lot of manufacturing jobs to China and Vietnam, and that's true. But a lot of the high-tech manufacturing jobs, that's just been lost to automation anyway. And that's going to be a continual problem that all states are going to face. So some form of remuneration through universal basic income, more public ownership and more worker ownership and kind of civilian ownership of where these kind of high productivity new sectors are going to come from, at least the ones that subsume existing productivity, is the only way that you can guarantee that remuneration ever happens. Because if all you're relying on is the benevolence of Elon Musk and of Peter Thiel, well, Peter Thiel's the guy who runs Palantir, and Elon Musk is the one who went, actually, I would rather that, I think that the figures from the Lancet said that tens of millions might die in the global south until 2030 due to his Doge cuts. I'm like, maybe that's a guy I wouldn't trust to look after the necessary payments to everybody to be able to live.
If you want to make an argument for kind of benevolent, paternalistic overlords, Elon Musk is not that.
Yeah, literally the very, very, very last person.
Who's the one guy you want to give absolute power to? Oh yeah, Elon Musk, he seems sort of stable and kind and nice.
Yeah, the guy who apparently, according to Susan Wiles, is continually in a K-hole. Nah, I'm not about that.
Don't give that guy all the power. I mean, I think the important point that Bernie's making, or the really open one, the one that sort of keeps me up at night a bit, and I think we're going to be talking a lot about next year, is like democracy is recent. Sort of a democracy where you have universal suffrage, where sort of everyone has some input into politics and there's sort of some liberal norms, that hasn't lasted very long. And a huge part of it was that the ruling class required the labor of the ordinary people, and they all lived in cities. So it wasn't, you couldn't sort of separate them all because it's in the countryside and they don't have free labor, etc. The idea that sort of democracy is just this thing that can work without that economic structure, when like rich people don't really need poor people at all, right? The idea that that's going to be a secure situation where we're going to have democracy and benevolent governance, I think is not clear at all. And so Bernie's saying, if you remove all these jobs, as you say you will, then what that's going to mean is that workers don't have any power. Now, maybe they're going to sort of benevolently hope that sort of these people at the top will still continue to respect democracy and will sort of allow it to be the case that they're voted out of some of the wealth that they've managed to accrue. But I'm not convinced that would be the case.
Well, if you look at the Curtis Yarvin types, they dream of company towns. They dream of this revolution that they will be the leaders of, that will subsume the current existence or the current kind of paradigm that we have of what the state looks like, of what society looks like, what democracy looks like, of what public buy-in looks like. And it doesn't involve democratic consent as far as I can see.
And all the people who say, oh, in the future we're going to have UBI and it's going to be brilliant and radical, in the present, when their money is actually on the line, are saying, oh, actually cut the welfare. Like I don't trust these people.
I mean, we did cover that guy. He was someone who was kind of, they seen as this godfather of AI. We covered it on this show, 3 or 4 months ago. And he literally said, well, the only answer is socialism. The only answer in a world in which so many of these jobs have gone, right? The capital labor dynamic that is inherent to capitalism, once you get rid of one side of that class conflict and you only have capital, only capital owners suddenly matter. And that's what a UBI world with the oligarchs in charge looks like. Whereas if it's collective ownership, and at least you've got a powerful enough and robust enough state to be able to enforce that collective ownership, then at the very least, the capital in this world in which only capital matters because there is no labor, at the very least, the people who own that, the people who are part of that dynamic, have a shared mutual interest in not upending that system. Which, of course, as you mentioned, the oligarchs, they don't have that, and the only reason there's any control, there's any kind of mediator on their unlimited power is the state and the fact that they require the labor power of the working class, right? And as soon as they don't need to bargain with those people who work, they have all of the power. They have all the power they need.
Yeah, that was Geoffrey Hinton speaking to the FT. It was lunch with the FT when he's sort of saying AI obviously means we're going to need socialism. Like I don't want a benevolent dictator, but I would much prefer it to be Geoffrey Hinton than Elon Musk. Let's wrap up there. Thank you, Helena, for joining me on this last show of the year. Absolute pleasure. Banger show, I thought, as well. Yeah. Really good one to end the year with. Great show. As I say, always so much better now we're here in person. It's so much easier to do back and forth. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in. Thank you for your support throughout 2025. We really, really do appreciate it. The YouTube channel's gone from strength to strength. If you want to help us continue to build in the new year, then please consider becoming a supporter if you haven't already. If you have already, thank you so much. If not, you can go to novaramedia.com/support. For now, have a fantastic Christmas. Have a fantastic break if you get one. Have a brilliant new year. We're going to be back on Monday, the 5th of January. For now, you've been watching Novara Media. Good night.